I first encountered Saba Malak when I was a summer consultant at Boston Consulting Group, and he was a new MBA. We stayed in touch, and when I became chairman of Advanced Practice Strategies a few years later, Saba joined the board as the lead investor. Since then, Saba has invested in various healthcare and biotech companies in the public and the private markets. I never thought of Saba as an operating executive, and apparently neither did he. But a couple years ago, he became so enamored with the company he'd invested in that he decided to take the plunge and become CEO. That company, CytImmune, is establishing a global leadership role in the field of cancer nanomedicine. It's a platform company with products of its own in development. The potential is gigantic. And in this episode of the Health Biz podcast, Saba explains the technology and why he is confident that it will ultimately help patients. The company has a phase 2 development collaboration with the National Cancer Institutes and is scaling up its manufacturing to be ready. I'm your host, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. If your healthcare or life sciences company needs strategy consulting support, please contact me at dwilliams@healthbusinessgroup.com. Great. Saba Malik, welcome to the Health Biz podcast.
Thank you, David. Good to be on with you.
Listen, we're gonna talk about curing cancer sooner rather than later, but before we do that, let's start at the beginning. And I'd love to know about your background. What was your upbringing like? Who were your big childhood influences?
I think, David, I grew up in Beirut, Lebanon, so I may be different from the majority of your guests. And grew up there until I came to college in the US at the age of 17. So grew up in Beirut in neighborhoods and very much was a street kid. It was kind of, I think, the closest thing that comes to mind is New York neighborhoods from maybe the number 1940s and 1950s, where all the kids would come down the street and play and would be there from morning to evening. And I had my own gang of friends and we grew up together. And, that was my upbringing. My big hero was my mom. My mom was a stay at home mom and she was great. Just lots of love and lots of care. And she also was very bright and learned a lot from her, got my curiosity and my love for reading and love for learning. Went to a private school in Lebanon. You pretty much needed to go to a private school. Went to the best private school in Lebanon, or one of the best, that was associated or attached to the American University of Beirut. The school was founded in the late 1800s by American missionaries. It was called International College. And, when it was time to go off to college, Lebanon was still in a state of turbulence. The Civil War was kind of on and off. And I was lucky. My dad always worked for American pharmaceutical companies. And I was lucky he was able to give me the option to come to school in the US or stay at the American University of Beirut. Um, and I kind of made the decision myself. Looked around, and I didn't think that the situation in Lebanon was going to be resolved anytime soon, and decided to try it out in the US. So I came to Tufts University. I had been in Boston only once before for a few days. I had never visited Tufts, essentially picked all my colleges out of a college book and decided to come to Tufts because I had some family in the area. And I've been here ever since.
You know, Thanks for sharing that. Remember it's hard to remember back to the days, before the internet and you're relying for information that's pretty secondhand. I mean, even now, if you haven't been to some place to go and look at a college, a lot of students are experiencing that. Of course, this year they can't travel, even though they have the internet and the virtual tours. But we're talking about, way back in the day. So at Tufts, sometimes that like that big elephant, the jumbo, is what attracts people. Was that part of the allure?
Yeah, no, I don't think I even knew about the jumbo when I came to Tufts. It really was familiarity and kind of wanting to fall back on the ability to spend some time with family if I got lonely or just have some support locally. So I have to add, the path that I took was really not one that was taken by any of my peers or any of the kids in the classes ahead of me. At my school, pretty much it was taken for granted that you'd go to the American University of Beirut. So hardly any kids ever came to the US. And the only reason I did it was one of my friends was doing it and kind of followed in his footsteps. He had done it the year before, and so I got some exposure to it. So even finding a college book, that was not something I could go to a bookstore and buy. I had to go to the library at the American University and find a book there, and literally just pick the colleges based on competitiveness. And at the time, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, but also wasn't sure if I wanted to be an engineer. So I picked colleges that had good engineering programs and good medical schools.
Well, they say, make good decisions, and it sounds like you did. Now, did your high school prepare you well for American colleges? How
Yes,
did it work out?
yeah, very well. So the educational system in Lebanon is based after the French system. So it's a baccalaureate system. And so you not fast track, but you focus in the last couple of years on a certain area. So I got a lot of math and physics and sciences before coming here. And in general, when I came to college, I found it pretty easygoing. I could have, I got credit for many courses or a few anyway, and could have finished in 3 years, but just decided to kind of stick around and graduate with my friends. So I took some extra courses.
Sounds good. And then from there on to the Ivy Leagues.
Yes, I got my bachelor's in engineering at Tufts in electrical engineering, and then went on to Penn for a year where I got a master's in engineering there. And after that, worked in consulting and management consulting for a couple of years. It's a firm that was in Lexington, Massachusetts, called Temper Barker and Sloan, that had multiple mergers with other consulting firms and is now called Oliver Wyman. And after that, on to Harvard Business School.
Great. And that's when I encountered you, I think probably just after you graduated, because we were both at Boston Consulting Group together.
That's right, a really great firm. I was doing some emailing with some former colleagues today, and just reflecting on the how special the BCG culture is. I was getting an introduction to a firm through a BCGer that I didn't know, and it just feels to me anyway that I'm connected to anyone who's worked at BCG, whether I know them or not. And I was reflecting on that and just thinking it's really about the types of people that BCG hires and the culture there, which I really admired and appreciated.
Now you went into investing after that at Putnam, and I remember when you left for that. What was that like, Putnam?
So Putnam was a very different culture. So I did stay at BCG for 5 years, and then found myself increasingly investing and spending my time on the weekend researching stocks and researching investments. And so the light bulb went off, and I thought, well, there is a career where I could be doing this for a living, and look to make the transition into investing. Putnam was more like what I envision most financial services to be like, more political, more of an aggressive culture. My interpretations, when there's money on the line or more money on the line, the elbows get sharper, and kind of culture goes by the wayside. So, joining Putnam at that time, Putnam was in its heyday. It was one of the very large, one of the behemoths in the industry. It was attracting a lot of assets, which is what you want to be doing if you're an asset manager, grow your AUMs. But while I was there, Putnam peaked and also started a long period of secular decline. And so it was fun when things were going great, and of course it was less fun when kind of assets started declining, and the firm went through some more difficult times.
I actually interviewed for a job at Putnam Investments when I was coming out of Harvard Business School, although not on the investment side, but they had some sort of a consulting practice. And I remember my interview quite distinctly because the person I was interviewing with, he said, yeah, he has kids, but his wife's pregnant, but he didn't expect that he was going to be there for the birth because that's not the kind of job it is. And I'm thinking, what a pitch. Maybe he's trying to get me to make my own decision, but that was striking to hear that actually come up directly in the interview. I think that was meant to be like a macho thing at the time.
That's weird. I have to say, I've always been pretty driven, so I worked pretty hard when I was at Putnam. But in general, I have to say, at least in the asset management business, the lifestyle is certainly much better than the lifestyle of a consultant. I think it's a difference between being the service provider and being the client. And of course, if you're in the asset management business, all the brokers are fawning after you, so you're the client. So a lot of people went home at 4 o'clock when the markets closed in the asset management business. So I'm not sure what unit that was that you interviewed for, but it was that sounds like it was scary there.
It struck me as kind of strange, and I didn't have the opportunity to test it out for myself to see if that was the norm or not. But I'm gratified to hear that they didn't have 1,000 people like that running around.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And I'm glad you came to BCG because I wouldn't have known you otherwise, probably. So good you took that detour or that chose that path.
Now, Saba, after Putnam, as you were there for a while, then sort of what did you learn there about what you like to do, and what did you set out to do after that?
So at Putnam, I focused on technology exclusively, and I did that for 10 years in different capacities as an analyst and research team leader, and then joined a fund team. So it just reaffirmed that I absolutely loved investing, loved researching companies and industries, and learning everything that I could about them, and of course, translating that into an investment decision. So that was my big takeaway. The other thing was just that I'm a very curious person, and so the need for variety and to learn something new ongoingly was important to me.
Great. So then, what kind of path did you follow between there and getting to CytImmune
So
ultimately?
I struck out on my own. I did that, as I said, after 10 years at Putnam. So that was back in 2007. And that's where our paths actually intersected again. I took a little time off, did a little traveling, but then got back into the investing game. And one of the first things that I did, as you know, was invest in a startup that you were involved with as chairman. And that was a private investment. So obviously, everything that I did at Putnam was investing in public companies, and specifically their very large public companies in the technology space. So this company that you and I became involved with, Advanced Practice Strategies, was a small company, a private company in the healthcare IT space. And so, with you and with another former colleague from BCG, talked about the company, did some research, and decided to make a large investment in the company in order to put it on a different path. And obviously, after many years, that turned out to be a big success.
Yeah, no, it was one of my first clients when I left BCG because I was doing consulting on my own, and I said these guys need strategy, but they also need some financing, and they also need somebody who can help them to renegotiate some of the deals they'd gotten themselves into, and hence bringing you in and our other colleague, and making a go of it. And as always, things you have to expect that things always take longer than expected, I guess, and it did, but at least we did get to a good result there.
Yeah, it did. So it took 8 years, and it was great to be on the board together. I enjoyed that, getting together periodically and helping at least guide the business from the board. And we did achieve an exit. So it took 8 years, but we were successful.
So then, since then, obviously more in investing, which you've, come to love and enjoy, I think both private and public side of things. And then somehow got yourself into actually running a company.
Right. So the part that I didn't, obviously APS was just a small part of it. I jumped back into the investing world or the investing activity in full force, and found myself attracted to a biopharma. There was no plan. I just looked for ideas, and increasingly found more and more ideas in the biotech and biopharma space. And for me, I like to be a specialist. I like to develop a base of knowledge, a depth of domain knowledge, because I feel that that gives me an edge. And before long, found myself exclusively investing in that space, this time in small public companies in the biotech space, but also continued to do once in a while some private investments, some in medical devices. And you and I have been involved with one company in that space, some in others in healthcare IT. But I also invested in my only biotech that was a private investment, and it happened to be CytImmune. So invested in the company, advised them for a period of time, and then just sat back as an investor. So stayed in touch, generally had an idea of what was going on. But out of the blue, a year and a half ago, they reached out to me and informed me that they had finally made the decision that it was time to make a transition from their founder CEO, and suggested that I do that. So after a lot of thought and research again, I decided to absolutely join, and it's been good.
There are a lot of people who started off in consulting as we did who decided that they want to be a little closer to the action and actually kind of, running companies and making decisions as opposed to advising on them. And in a sense, you went initially the other way because in investing, although you're providing advice, you're more kind of trusting the management and not doing all the strategy necessarily. But then you sort of have come around to the other side. Did you have it in mind at any point before this that you wanted to take an operating role like that?
I never did, and in fact, I never thought of myself as an operator. I very much thought of myself as an arm's length analyst, assessor, and investor. But the reason I got involved is I had huge conviction of the potential of this company and the platform. And so, in a way, it's both a decision to be an operator, but also just a bet on the outcome of this investment in time and capital that I'm making. So obviously, I invested a long time ago. Now my investment is in sweat equity and effort and time, and also an opportunity cost because I no longer have the time to spend on my other investments. So this is a 120% kind of endeavor. But I feel great about it, and every week I have more and more conviction that we're going to have something big here.
Great. So let's talk about what the company actually does. Now you've got the word immune and the word, I guess not a word, but I guess a word cell, as I would have been taught in third grade, site. But so what is CytImmune?
So CytImmune is a company. It's been around for a while. It has a platform that delivers anti-cancer and anti-tumor payloads into the tumor. One of the biggest challenges is getting drugs into the tumor. One, getting them to the tumor, and then getting them to penetrate deep into the tumor. And that's what CytImmune does. The immune part of the word comes from the fact that although we can deliver multifunctional payloads, in other words, multiple payloads that do different things and deliver them at the same time, an important component of that is delivering immune cytokines. These are important immune system modulators, and these are extremely important these days in the world of immunotherapy or immuno-oncology.
So CytImmune itself is not developing a drug, but rather it's helpful for other potential drugs that are there and help to solve problems for drugs that otherwise might not be as efficacious or as safe as they need to be.
Well, actually, both. So we have a platform. From that platform, we have our own pipeline of therapeutics, but we can also offer that platform out to license it to other companies to put their therapeutics and essentially enhance their functionality, deliver them in the tumor in combination with some of our key components. So we have both. And we have a big pipeline, and we're growing our pipeline.
So the challenge with these things is actually, getting them from working in the lab or conceptually to all the way to the patient and really helping them. So talk a little bit about that journey and kind of where CytImmune is on that.
Okay, so actually, the journey starts outside of CytImmune. It starts in Europe with clinicians who discovered or pioneered a procedure called the isolated limb perfusion procedure, where they put a limb on bypass, like a heart lung machine, essentially. And the goal of doing that is to isolate the circulation of the limb from the body's circulation. And then they found that if they infuse immune cytokine called tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF alpha, into the limb and follow it up with an infusion of chemotherapy, that they dramatically enhance the efficacy compared to doing the same thing with chemotherapy alone. And one of the pioneers of that procedure is actually a member of our scientific advisory board, and his name's Dr. Alexander Egermont. So the reason they need to put the limb on bypass is TNF alpha is a very powerful anti-tumor and anti-cancer agent, but it's also highly toxic. So if they were to infuse that dose of TNF alpha into people systemically, it would have killed them. So the whole scientific inspiration of CytImmune was how does it take that model, that proven model of isolated limb perfusion, but rather than have it be done in a niche procedure that's a quasi-surgical procedure, so that procedure requires an operating room and an anesthesiologist, multiple hours. How can we take that model and apply it to any solid tumor anywhere in the body? And that's how the platform was born. CytImmune came up with a platform. It's a nanotechnology platform that uses a gold nanoparticle, and it attaches the tumor necrosis factor TNF alpha to it, and that TNF remains bound to the gold nanoparticles never released, and that nanoparticle stays in circulation a long time until it gets to the tumor and then exits circulation into the tumor. And we can get into the details of how that happens, but what you need to know is it exits the tumor, destroys the tumor's blood vessels completely over the course of a few hours. And that's super important because tumors are highly pressurized. They have a lot of fluid inside of them because they have leaky blood vessels. So the pressure inside of a tumor can be up to 40 times the pressure of surrounding tissues. So think of it as a very highly pressurized balloon, if you will. So when we destroy the tumor's vasculature, that tumor fluid pressure drops dramatically. And that fluid pressure is a key obstacle for drugs getting into the tumor. So if we dose a drug after we give our TNF drug, we get 5 to 15 times more drug into the tumor. And importantly, our next generation candidates carry the payload directly on the particle. So we actually deliver the tumor necrosis factor alpha and a payload, such as a cytotoxic, such as a chemotherapy, but we can put anything on there. And we get, as I mentioned, up to 15 times more of that drug into the tumor and importantly, bypass healthy tissues, which means that you don't get the side effects that you get from most cancer medicines. So where we are is we are phase 2 ready. We have an agreement with the NCI, and the NCI will be funding and running our first phase 2 trials as soon as we can get them enough drug to start those trials.
Great. So NCI, of course, National Cancer Institute. Saba, when you explain it to me, it sounds, if not straightforward, at least logical. When you talk about this approach with oncologists or others who are working in the space, does it resonate or does it go counter to what they expect and have been taught?
It's a little bit all over the board, and it really depends on one, the person's focus or area of expertise that we're talking about, and also if the person has biases. So, for example, some people are biased against nanotechnologies. They say they've been tried in oncology and they didn't work. And of course, what I say is they didn't work because they didn't deliver tumor necrosis factor alpha. So when other nanotechnologies tried to get into the tumor, they hit that fluid pressure barrier. And our secret sauce is TNF alpha. So we think we've resolved that problem with delivering nanotechnologies into the tumor. So once that's kind of the biggest obstacle. Once we can get beyond that point, I think folks get it and appreciate it. And I have to say, a lot of the docs that we've been talking to are extremely enthusiastic, and we're actually growing our base of academic collaborations kind of ongoingly. And that's a function of just excitement with what we're working on and what they think the potential is.
Intellectual property is important in any kind of a business like this. How do you think about the intellectual property strategy for platform companies such as this compared with, let's say, a drug company? They say have drugs as well, or even other platform companies. Is it a unique approach?
So the company's been around for a while, and we have a key patent protecting the platform that will be expiring in 2023. However, the first thing that we did, and I have to say, part of me joining the company, and we also have a new president who's, we work very much hand in hand. The first thing we did is we brought back the other co-founder of the company and the inventor of all the science and technology. He had stepped away for about 3 or 4 years from the company. And the first thing that we did was just sat down and talked about all the undisclosed innovations. And we are about to file a provisional patent that will protect the platform for a very long time. So it's really about, just when you're looking at a platform, you want something that's common to the whole platform that can be patented. And I think if you've got that, you're all set. Now, what's interesting is, as I mentioned, we have second generation compounds, although I didn't call them as such. Our first generation just delivers TNF alpha. The second generation compounds deliver TNF alpha plus something else. Each of those constructs is patentable as a new chemical entity. We also, in the case of small molecules, I mentioned we have two drugs where we attach different chemotherapies to the platform. Those are attached with proprietary linkers, and so those linkers are patented as well. So there's multiple layers of IP protection.
Whenever you're doing any kind of drug or platform development, it's going to be quite expensive, a lot of capital costs over time. What's the order of magnitude that's required to bring this technology to market? And what are the sort of sources that you tap in order to do that at different stages?
So it really depends on your development path because a key decision a company has to make is what they keep in house and what they out license. So right now in our pipeline, we have four drug candidates with the potential to add at least one more that we'll be start working on soon. By the way, we developed our fourth very quickly over the past 6 months. So we are moving very quickly and with limited resources. So, if we were to decide that we wanted to move five programs forward, let's say through phase two, uh, I don't think it'd be unreasonable to say that each program would cost 40 to $50 million. Of course, it depends on the starting point. But a key decision, as I mentioned, is whether the asset is better suited to stay in house or to be licensed to big pharma. Two reasons. One, as a small company, we have limited bandwidth. So by definition, I don't think we'll ever be able to push five programs forward. I mean, maybe in the future, but right now we're very small. Also, some of the assets that we have potential across all solid tumors. And the way you maximize the value of an asset like that is you run multiple trials in different solid tumor types. That's an even more expensive proposition, and one that's a much better fit for a very large pharma. So, an important part of our strategy is engaging with big pharma, both to potentially out license some of our assets, but also kind of back to what you mentioned earlier, which is we have a platform company. We've already put one big pharma's proprietary molecule on our platform and improved it very significantly. In fact, it wasn't usable on its own because of liver toxicity. And we totally translocated the delivery of that drug from the liver to the tumor and got very good efficacy data. So we can do that to drugs that are toxic or not bioavailable enough by putting them on our platform. So there's a whole conversation that's around doing that and potentially adding other things on the platform that are synergistic with their proprietary molecules to enhance them further.
Great. So, what would you expect in terms of milestones for the year ahead if you're so bold as to put those out there?
Yeah, no. So we're very excited. Our fourth program that we've just created, our fourth molecule or compound or agent, if you will, is a combination IO immunotherapy module. It's a combination of TNF alpha and interferon gamma, two very synergistic cytokines. Like all cytokines, they're both very toxic and can't really be dosed at a therapeutic dose on their own. And there's a strong IO rationale for putting them on the platform. We've won a grant from the Nanotech Characterization Lab for this drug. So they're doing some immune characterization work for us on it. That'll be done in a couple of months. And after that, we're ready for animal studies. So that's going to be key, a whole rollout of animal data over the course of the year for that drug. For our lead drug, which is the TNF alpha drug, an important milestone is raising enough capital to start CGMP manufacturing so that we can get started with the NCI phase 2 trials. We also have work ongoing in Tokyo with a collaborator there, looking at the combination of our TNF alpha drug with checkpoint inhibitors. We have work starting at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Institute in Australia, looking at the combination of TNF alpha with CAR T. We have a collaboration with Rutgers that's more likely to be focused on our interferon gamma drug. We have a new collaboration with the University of Virginia Medical School looking at both the TNF alpha and the interferon gamma drug. And we're likely to add more that I can't disclose now. So we're going to have a lot of data that's combination data with immuno-oncology drugs and also new data for our new compound, the interferon gamma combination. And lastly, we expect before the end of the year to have a new combination agent, TNF alpha with another cytokine, possibly interleukin 12 or interleukin 2, high value payloads. And we hope to show that we formulated it and started generating at least in vitro data, if not animal data, before the end of the year. So a busy year for us.
Sounds like it. Good. Well, with all that ahead, have you had time to do any reading, and do you have any books that you would recommend to listeners?
I probably started 6 or 7 books and stopped, and I can't remember the last time I picked any one of them. I find that my attention span is, I think, like most of us, is getting fragmented, and I'm much more turned into, reading bits and pieces on the iPad of kind of different email formats of pieces of news. And then probably the longest format that I'm reading right now is newspaper articles. So no, I'm sorry, no recommendations from me.
Yeah, no
I think
problem.
I think I'm getting the developing my attention spans shrinking and shrinking, kind of the attention span of a gnat eventually.
Ha. Well, I hope going back to the earlier part of the show, I hope that no one from your high school is listening and saying this is our first proud alumnus that we sent out over to the U.S. and here's what we have to show for it.
Yeah, no, and interestingly, actually, after I came to the U.S. From Beirut, going back to high school, the year after that, the situation in Beirut and our kind of neighborhood got terrible. So actually, a lot of people, and now it's become a very well trodden path where tons of people come to study in the U.S. So a lot of my classmates followed a year or two after me and ended up in the U.S. So I'm definitely not unique anymore.
Got it. Excellent. Well, on that note, Saba Malak, CEO of CytImmune, I want to say thank you very much for being on the Health Biz podcast and best wishes for your busy and successful year.
Thank you very much, David. Thanks for having me, and a pleasure to speak with you and to catch up.
You've been listening to the Health Biz podcast with me, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare business and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.